GF left me and our newborn son without any warning. When she returned, she had hidden her cancer during pregnancy and chose our baby's life over treatment. But now I'm with someone new. I, 34M, never thought I'd be posting here, but recent events have left me questioning everything. This is going to be long, but I need outside perspective to help me process what's happening. First, I need to take you back to where it all began. I met Sarah, 33F, during our sophomore year of college. We were both taking an environmental science elective, and she caught my attention immediately. It wasn't just that she was beautiful. What really drew me to her was her passion. She could talk for hours about marine conservation, her dream of working with endangered species, and how she wanted to make a real difference in the world. I remember sitting in the campus coffee shop until closing time, just listening to her talk about her latest research project. We dated all through college, and things just clicked. We had the same weird sense of humor, finished each other's sentences, and had this uncanny ability to know exactly what the other person needed without asking. After graduation, we moved in together, and everything felt right. We had our struggles, sure, entry-level jobs weren't exactly paying the big bucks, and we lived in a tiny apartment where the hot water would randomly cut out in the middle of showers. But we were happy. We had plans, dreams, and each other. I proposed on our 5th anniversary. I had this whole elaborate plan involving a scavenger hunt through all our favorite spots in the city, ending at the coffee shop where we had our first real conversation. But in typical fashion, nothing went according to plan. It rained all day, half the places I'd planned to include were closed for renovations, and Sarah got called into work for an emergency. She'd achieved her dream and was working at a marine research center. I ended up proposing in our apartment, both of us soaking wet from the rain, eating takeout Chinese food on our second-hand couch. She said it was perfect. We spent the next year planning our wedding. Sarah wanted something outdoors, near the ocean she loved so much. We found this beautiful venue on the coast, with a ceremony spot overlooking the water. Everything was coming together. We had the date set for the following spring, deposits paid, invitations designed and ready to be sent out. Then Sarah was pregnant. It wasn't planned, we'd actually talked about waiting a few years after marriage before having kids. But when that pregnancy test came back positive, we were overjoyed. Sure, it meant changing some wedding plans. Sarah didn't want to be visibly pregnant in her dress, but we were too excited to care. We pushed the wedding back a year and focused on preparing for our baby. The pregnancy itself was textbook perfect. Sarah had some morning sickness in the first trimester, but nothing severe. We converted our home office into a nursery, painting the walls with an ocean theme, of course. Sarah would sit in the rocking chair we'd bought, reading marine biology textbooks out loud to her bump, saying she wanted our baby to love the ocean as much as she did. But there were signs something was wrong. Small things I dismissed at the time but now haunt me. She started having these intense headaches around the 7th month, but the doctor said it was normal pregnancy stuff. She seemed more tired than usual, even for someone growing a human being. And there were moments when I'd catch her just staring into space. But whenever I asked, she'd smile and say everything was fine, just pregnancy hormones. James was born on a Tuesday morning in October. It was a relatively easy delivery, all things considered. Sarah was amazing throughout it all, and when they placed our son in her arms, I thought I'd never seen anything more beautiful. He had her eyes, and a full head of dark hair. We spent 3 days in the hospital, just being new parents, learning how to change diapers and swaddle properly. Sarah seemed different, but I chalked it up to new mom adjustment. She was quieter than usual, spent a lot of time just staring at James with an unreadable expression. The first couple of weeks at home were what you'd expect with a newborn, exhausting but wonderful. We took turns with night feedings, figured out how to function on minimal sleep, and marveled at every little thing James did. But Sarah's behavior started becoming increasingly concerning. She'd spend hours just sitting in the nursery, even when James was asleep. She stopped eating regularly, saying she wasn't hungry. When I suggested she might have postpartum depression, she'd completely shut down the conversation. Then came that day. It started normally enough. James was 3 weeks old, and I needed to make a grocery run. Sarah seemed fine, was feeding James when I left. I remember kissing them both goodbye, telling them I'd be back soon. The store was crowded, and I ended up taking longer than planned. When I got home, the house felt wrong somehow. Too quiet. I found the letter on James's changing table. Even now, 6 years later, I can quote it word for word. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. You and James deserve better than what I can give you. Please don't try to find me. Please don't hate me. Take care of our boy. Tell him his mama loves him more than anything in this world, which is why I have to go." Sarah, the next few hours are a blur in my memory. I remember calling the police, trying to file a missing persons report, but since she'd left voluntarily and wasn't in danger, there wasn't much they could do. I called her parents, who seemed just as shocked as I was. They hadn't heard from her, had no idea where she might have gone. I called hospitals, thinking maybe she'd had some kind of breakdown. Nothing. The reality of being a single father to a newborn hit hard and fast. I had to take emergency leave from work, thank God for understanding bosses. My sister Jenny became my lifeline. She had 2 kids of her own and practically moved in with us those first few months. She taught me everything, how to tell different types of crying apart, how to properly burp him, how to manage feeding schedules while still taking care of myself. The legal stuff came next. I filed for full custody, which was granted by default since Sarah never showed up to contest it. Her name remained on James's birth certificate, but in every other way, I was a single parent. I tried to keep track of her, hired a private investigator at one point, but she disappeared completely. No social media, no credit card trails, nothing. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. Those first few years were the hardest thing I've ever done. Working full-time while raising a baby alone is no joke. I was lucky to have an amazing support system, my parents, Jenny, friends who'd show up with meals or offer to babysit so I could get a few hours of sleep. But the emotional toll was enormous. James would cry for hours sometimes, and I'd find myself crying right along with him, wondering if he somehow knew his mother was gone. I didn't date for a long time. Honestly, I didn't have the energy or emotional capacity for it. My whole world revolved around James and making sure he had everything he needed. But about 2 years ago, my sister convinced me to try online dating. That's how I met Emma. Emma was different from anyone I'd ever dated. She was a kindergarten teacher, divorced, no kids but great with them. Our first date was supposed to be coffee, but we ended up talking for 4 hours. I was upfront about James from the start, and she was amazing about it. She understood that he came first, that dating a single parent meant things would move slowly. The first time she met James was at a playground, very casual, no pressure. She brought bubbles and spent an hour chasing him around, making up stories about bubble dragons. By the end of the day, he was calling her Miss Emma and asking when she could come play again. Watching them together, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. Our relationship progressed naturally. Emma never tried to force a connection with James or push herself into a maternal role. She just showed up. She'd come over for movie nights, help with bedtime stories, attend his t-ball games. When he had nightmares, she'd make hot chocolate and listen to him talk about his fears. When he was sick, she'd bring over homemade chicken soup and new coloring books. 6 months ago, after a lot of discussion and family therapy sessions, Emma moved in with us. The transition was smoother than I could have hoped. James was excited to have her there full time, and our little family unit felt complete. We talked about marriage, about Emma legally adopting James someday if that's what he wanted. Life was good. Then Sarah showed up. I was at work, reviewing some client files, when my assistant told me someone was asking to see me. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I agreed to a quick meeting. When she walked in, I didn't recognize her at first. Her hair was different, shorter, styled differently, and she looked thinner, more angular. But those eyes. I'd know those eyes anywhere. She asked if we could talk, and something in her expression made me agree. We met at a coffee shop after work, not our old one. I couldn't handle that. She ordered green tea, something she used to hate, and her hands shook as she held the cup. The story came out slowly, painfully. Shortly before James was born, she'd started having severe headaches and dizzy spells. She'd gone to the doctor without telling me, thinking it was pregnancy related. It wasn't. They found an aggressive form of breast cancer, already at stage 3. The doctors wanted to start treatment immediately, but she was pregnant. She chose to delay treatment until after James was born, knowing it could worsen her prognosis. She showed me medical records, hospital bills, documentation of years of treatment. Multiple surgeries, aggressive chemotherapy, radiation. She'd gone through it all alone, living in a small apartment near the hospital, working part-time at a local aquarium gift shop to pay bills when she could. Her parents hadn't known either. She'd cut contact with everyone. When I asked why she didn't tell me, her answer broke my heart all over again. She said she couldn't bear the thought of James growing up watching her die, of having memories of a sick mother rather than no memories at all. She thought if she died, it would be easier for us to move on if we'd already learned to live without her. If she lived, she could come back and explain everything. She's been in remission for 2 years now. She's followed our lives from afar, found my social media, saw pictures of James growing up. She talked about how much he looks like her, how proud she is of all his achievements she's seen posted online. She cried when she talked about missing his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. Then she wants to come back. Not just as James's mother, but she wants us, our relationship, everything we had. She says she still loves me, that leaving us was the biggest mistake of her life even if she thought she was doing the right thing at the time. She wants another chance. I listened to everything. I tried to understand her perspective, to imagine the fear and pain she must have felt. But when she finished, I told her no. I explained about Emma, about the life we've built, about how James has finally stopped asking why his mother left him. I told her I would be willing to discuss supervised visitation eventually, after consulting with Emma and our lawyer, but that's all I could offer. She didn't take it well. She became upset, saying I was punishing her for trying to protect us. She's been calling and texting constantly since then. Her family, who I haven't heard from in years, is now reaching out. They say I'm being cruel, that she made a mistake out of love and fear, that she deserves forgiveness and a second chance. Some of their messages have gotten to me. They point out that Sarah sacrificed everything, her relationship with her child, her family, her entire support system, because she thought it was best for James. They say that kind of sacrifice deserves understanding and forgiveness. Her mother called me crying, saying she lost years with her daughter and doesn't want James to lose his mother too. But then I remember those years of pain. The nights spent wondering what I did wrong. The times James would cry himself to sleep asking for a mommy who wasn't there. So yeah, even if I am the asshole here, I won't agree to take her back. Emma has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She says she'll support whatever decision I make regarding James having a relationship with Sarah, but she's also honest about her concerns. James knows something is going on, he's a perceptive kid. I haven't told him about Sarah yet. But he's been asking questions about his birth mother more frequently lately, as if he can sense the upheaval in our lives. So here I am, Reddit. Ida for refusing to give Sarah another chance? Sometimes when I look at James, who is so much like her in so many ways, I wonder if I'm being too harsh. Edit 1. Thank you all for the responses. To address some common questions. 1. Yes, I've verified her medical records, the cancer diagnosis and treatment were real. 2. She did try to send child support about a year after leaving, but I refused it. I was hurt and angry then. 3. Emma knows everything and has been incredibly supportive through this whole situation. 4. I have spoken with a family law attorney about the situation. While Sarah's parental rights were never officially terminated, my having sole legal and physical custody gives me the right to make decisions about visitation. Edit 2. For those asking about Sarah's current health status, she has been cancer-free for 2 years and her doctors are optimistic about her long-term prognosis. However, they can't guarantee the cancer won't return, which is one of my concerns about reintroducing her to James's life. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Many of you asked for updates and clarification on several points, so I'll try to address everything while sharing how things have developed over the past month. After my initial post, I spent a lot of time reflecting on the feedback I received. Many of you pointed out that while Sarah's actions were devastating, her motivation came from a place of desperate love rather than malice. This perspective has helped me approach the situation with more empathy, even as I maintain firm boundaries for James's well-being. One of the first things I need to address is the verification of Sarah's story, since many commenters were understandably skeptical. Yes, I have thoroughly verified her medical records. The cancer diagnosis was real, stage 3 triple-negative breast cancer, diagnosed at 32 weeks of pregnancy. The documentation shows everything: the initial diagnosis, her decisions regarding treatment delay, the subsequent surgeries, chemotherapy protocols, radiation treatments, and finally, her remission status. Reading through these records was like experiencing those lost years from a parallel universe, one where I could have been by her side through it all, if she'd only let me. The medical records also shed light on something I hadn't fully processed from our conversation: just how close we came to losing her entirely. Her oncologist notes indicate that by delaying treatment until after James's birth, her survival chances dropped significantly. She quite literally chose our son's health over her own, though I still struggle with her decision to face it alone. Regarding her current health status, she's been cancer-free for 2 years now. Her doctors are a bit optimistic about her long-term prognosis, but as with any cancer survivor, there are no guarantees. This uncertainty plays a significant role in my hesitation about reintroducing her to James's life. The thought of him losing her twice, especially if he forms an attachment, keeps me awake at night. Many of you asked about child support and Sarah's attempts to contribute financially. Yes, she did try to send money about a year after she left. I received an envelope with no return address containing a cashier's check and a brief note saying she wanted to help support James. I was still raw with grief and anger then, and I sent it back unopened. I recognized this was more about my pain than James's best interests, but I was not in a place to accept anything from her at that time. Since then, I've learned she set up a trust fund for James's education, contributing what she could manage while working part-time during her treatment. She never told me about it because she knew I would refuse it. The trust currently holds enough to cover about 2 years of college expenses. Emma's role in all of this deserves its own discussion. Many commenters asked how she's handling the situation, and I continue to be amazed by her. We've had several long conversations about what Sarah's reappearance means for our family. The legal aspect of this situation has also been a major focus. I've had several consultations with a family law attorney to understand our options and rights. While Sarah's parental rights were never officially terminated, my having sole legal and physical custody gives me significant control over any potential visitation arrangements. The attorney advised that while Sarah could potentially petition the court for visitation rights, judges typically favor maintaining stability in the child's life and would likely support a gradual, supervised reintroduction if any contact is allowed. Sarah's family's involvement has added another layer of complexity to the situation. After years of silence, I'm now fielding calls and messages from her parents, siblings, and even extended family members. Their perspectives range from understanding my caution to outright hostility over my reluctance to immediately welcome Sarah back into our lives. Her mother, in particular, has been persistent, sending long messages about second chances and the importance of family bonds. I understand their position. They lost years with their daughter too, and they see this as a chance to rebuild their family completely. But they weren't there during those dark years. They didn't hold a crying toddler who couldn't understand why he didn't have a mommy like his friends did. They didn't field questions from well-meaning strangers about James's mother, or watch him scan crowds at school events, looking for someone who wasn't there. Well, that's all for now. I will post an update soon if there is one. Update 2. First, I want to thank everyone who responded to my original and update post. Your comments and perspectives helped me process a lot of complicated feelings and gave me the clarity I needed to handle this situation. A lot has happened since then, and I think I owe you all an update. After my post gained a bit of traction, Sarah somehow managed to find it. She recognized our story and sent me a long email about it. Reading her perspective of everything that happened was intense. She filled in a lot of gaps about those years she was gone, and I think sharing her story might help people understand the complexity of our situation. According to Sarah, she first noticed something was wrong during her second trimester. She was having severe headaches that wouldn't go away with normal medication. At first, she dismissed them as pregnancy-related, but when she started feeling lumps in her breast, she knew something was wrong. She went to a doctor without telling me. She says she didn't want to worry me until she knew for sure what was happening. The diagnosis came back with stage 3 breast cancer. The doctors wanted to start treatment immediately, but she was pregnant. They gave her options on whether to terminate the pregnancy and start treatment, or wait until after delivery but risk the cancer spreading. She chose to wait. She said she couldn't bear the thought of terminating when we'd been so happy about the baby. She shared her medical records with me, and they tell a brutal story. By the time James was born, the cancer had progressed significantly. The headaches she'd been having were related to small metastases that had already started forming. Her doctors told her she had maybe a 30% chance of survival if she started aggressive treatment immediately. She said the day she left was the hardest day of her life. She'd written and rewritten that letter dozens of times. She described sitting in the nursery, watching me leave for groceries, and holding James for what she thought would be the last time. She took photos on her phone, hundreds of them, of every little detail of his face, his tiny fingers, the way he smiled in his sleep. After leaving, she moved to a small town about 3 hours away where she had a distant cousin who worked as a nurse. This cousin was the only person who knew the whole truth. She helped Sarah find an apartment near the hospital and connected her with doctors. Sarah started aggressive treatment immediately, a combination of chemotherapy, radiation, and multiple surgeries. She lost her hair within weeks. The chemotherapy was so aggressive that she could barely keep food down. She had 3 major surgeries in the first year alone. Her cousin would come by after shifts to help her, as Sarah was often too weak to even get out of bed. She worked when she could at the hospital gift shop, but most of her savings went to medical bills. She tried to send money for James about a year after leaving. She'd managed to save up a few $1,000s from her part-time work. I had refused it, and now I know why. She was literally sending every penny she could spare while going through cancer treatment. What really got to me was learning about how she stayed connected to us. She created an Instagram account just to follow my sister's page, which occasionally had photos of James. Her worst day, she says, was when she saw the first picture of James with Emma on my social media. She said she cried for hours, but also felt relieved that he had someone in his life who could be there for him in ways she couldn't. She never commented or reached out because she was still going through treatment and didn't want to disrupt our lives if she wasn't going to survive. The recovery process was long and difficult. Even after the cancer went into remission, she spent months in physical therapy, rebuilding her strength. She had to learn to write again after nerve damage from chemotherapy affected her hands. She went through extensive reconstructive surgery. It was 2 full years after her remission before her doctors said she was stable enough to consider resuming normal life. She spent that time in therapy, working through her decisions and their consequences. Her therapist helped her understand that while her intentions were protective, her actions had caused significant trauma to both me and James. She worked on developing better coping mechanisms and communication skills. When she finally reached out to me at my workplace, she had spent months planning what to say. She had a whole speech prepared about understanding if I hated her, about being willing to accept any role in James's life that I deemed appropriate. But seeing me in person overwhelmed her, and everything came out wrong. She's been sending me regular updates about her health since our meeting. Her latest scans are clear, and her oncologist is optimistic about her long-term prognosis. She's on a maintenance treatment plan and has checkups every 3 months. She's also continued with therapy. After much discussion with Emma and our lawyer, we've decided to move forward with a very gradual approach to introducing Sarah back into James's life. She will not tell James about her cancer yet. All initial meetings will be supervised by me, and will only happen when James expresses interest in meeting her. She has agreed to sign a legal document stating she will maintain consistent contact once visitation begins. This addresses my fear of her disappearing from his life again. She has also agreed to continue her own therapy and attend co-parenting counseling with me. Emma has been incredible throughout this process. She's secure in her relationship with James and sees Sarah's presence as an addition to his support system rather than a threat to her role in his life. She actually met with Sarah privately to discuss how they can both be positive influences in James's life without creating confusion or conflict. Sarah's family has also been more understanding since I explained our gradual approach plan. They see that we're not cutting Sarah out, but rather trying to reintroduce her in a way that's healthy for everyone, especially James. They've agreed to follow our lead and not mention anything to James until we're ready. I know this update might disappoint those who wanted me to either completely embrace Sarah's return or totally reject her. The reality is messier and more complicated. We're taking small steps, prioritizing James's health, and trying to build something sustainable rather than rushing into changes that could hurt him more in the long run. I want to thank this community again for helping me navigate the initial shock of Sarah's return. Your comments helped me see that there was a middle ground between completely shutting her out and immediately welcoming her back.